Sponsored by Squarespace.
Throughout the 5 past decades, miniatures have slowly grown from a fringe hobby to a worldwide phenomenon, with Warhammer collectibles grabbing as much as $35,000 on eBay auctions. What? And celebrities such as Henry Cavill, Robin Williams, Ed Sheeran and Vin Diesel, just to mention a few that's been collecting Warhammer throughout the years. And personally, I'm definitely in deep, having far too many miniatures collected. It's like a heavy addiction, I don't know what to do at this point. And today we're going to cover some of those rarest miniatures in the hobby history. And seriously, you want to stick out to the end, because I've got a story about a rare collection that was gone for over 15 years. Let's start. The single biggest brand on the miniature market is definitely Games Workshop. Since their start in '75, they produced thousands and thousands of different miniature models. And some of these are rarer than others. And one of these dates back to early 2000s. Games Workshop had just acquired the license for the Lord of the Rings game, meaning that they could create characters and scenes from the movies. And one of the more unexpected ones is not actually in the movies, but it's the director of the trilogy, Peter Jackson. He was made into a Hobbit and only 2 copies were ever made, one of which is still at the Games Workshop headquarters, and the other one, well, it actually sits with Peter Jackson. This might actually be the most rare Warhammer miniature ever made. But there's tons of other models that were actually obtainable, but rare nonetheless. How about the forgeworld Empire Marienburg landship? If you were an Empire player, you probably drooled over this kit for years until it was discontinued. And I have no exact number of how many copies were made, but considering how poorly fantasy miniatures from Forgeworld have sold throughout the years, I am assuming it's not thousands and thousands of models. Back then, I think the miniature cost around £150, but right now on eBay you will not find one for under 800 bucks. If you're feeling fancy though, there is obviously 3D printable proxies, but it's not quite the same thing. But it's something. In previous videos, we've also briefly touched on the armor cast side of Games Workshop's history. I did an entire video on the great Gargant, which is one of my favorite Warhammer models ever. A miniature that you cannot find on the internet, and if you for some reason manage to come across one, I think you're gonna have to pay somewhere between $800 and $2,000 depending on the condition. There's a few that's easier to obtain, and that is the Warhound Titan and the Reaver Titan. Those 2 models you can find for about $500. But that again, if you can find them. And throughout the years, Games Workshop have released quite a few of rare Games Day miniatures, meaning miniatures that's only available for one day at an event. One of my favorites is definitely the Slan from '06. Just paint me like one of your French toads. I've seen some amazing paint jobs of that model, and if you manage to find one, the price today is about $100. And speaking of Warhammer Fantasy, if you liked ogres, there were quite a few really awesome ones. Way back, Games Workshop used to make unique models that were given only to the staff or sold only to the staff. One of those is Broad the Slave Lord, a dream for any ogre player. However, for this one figure, oh my god, they're asking $570 for one miniature, and it's not even a big one. But let's take a short break from Games Workshop minis to get back to that at the end of the video, because I have a few other really cool ones. This miniature is Baba Yaga from Lucas Pina and his brand Spira Mirabilis. Lucas has become somewhat of a living legend in the miniature industry. He creates some of the best miniature busts ever made. And every release that he does, he only makes the miniature available for 48 hours, and then they make that set amount of miniature that's ordered, and no other miniatures are made either before or after. So if there's ever a miniature that was made by him that you now want, you're probably gonna have to pay at least double on eBay. With this one exception, of course, that you're not gonna find on eBay. And it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb to those of us that started with the miniature hobby after he released the miniature, because it was only sold in about 40 copies. And that really makes me want one, because the ones that they sell now are probably made at about 1,000 copies each. And speaking of rare busts, Chris Clayton have made a bust called Hush. It's pretty damn awesome, but for some reason there was only 50 of them made. and it's been painted by one of the best painters ever, Kirill Kanaev. So it's not only one of the best miniatures ever made, but it's one of the best paint jobs by one of the best painters ever made. And this specific miniature, I nor any of my friends who collect miniatures have seen one of these for sale.
What manner of man are you who can summon awesome-looking websites without any previous knowledge of how to make websites or programming knowledge? There are some who call me Squarespace. Greetings, Squarespace. Greetings, King Squidmar, on your quest for the holy website. You know my name? Oh, I do, King Squidmar. I know a lot of things. I know that Squarespace can help you make awesome looking websites with their award-winning templates. So you can make web shops, you can make galleries without any previous knowledge of either programming or web design. Now Squarespace have a 14 days free trial. Will you help me on my quest for holy websites? But of course! You can use the code SQUIDMAR for 10% off your entire purchase. Hooray!
The now almost legendary game Kingdom Death has really carved out a niche in the miniature hobby with its horror-themed miniature game, and miniatures often being released in limited editions. The first release Kingdom Death did was a Kickstarter which amassed a total of $1,700 back in 2009. This to fund their first ever sculpted miniature. After that, the game quickly became an underground favorite. And 8 years later, they launched another Kickstarter, but this time they funded a whopping $12,400,000 from a total of 19,264 backers. That, my friends, is a nice development. So naturally, at the time of this recording, the first couple of releases from the first couple of Kickstarters have become really sought after. An example of that is this first edition Forsaken from the first Kickstarter, which funnily enough has an ask of a total of 2,000 Great British pounds, which means that this single figure costs more than the entire first release managed to fund. That, I think, is awesome. But now let's move on to a personal favorite. This is HeroQuest, a collaboration between Games Workshop and Milton Bradley Games. In the 80s and 90s, this game was all the rave among the kids who wanted to play role-playing games, but Dungeons & Dragons was a little bit too advanced. And I have the game, plus all of the expansions, except for 2 in my collection. And these 2, they were not even released in Europe, which was actually one of its biggest markets. It's the Elven Quest and the Barbarian Quest. And because they wasn't released in Europe and they were released at the end of the cycle where the game was popular, they didn't sell a lot, which means that today they are super rare. And the fact that it was a game mostly played by kids who often don't take care of their games and miniatures means that they're actually really rare. At its peak about a year ago, Barbarian Quest sold for about $1,000 and the Elven Quest game sold for about $1,500. They are a little bit cheaper now, but I really hope that someday I will be able to get these for my collection because they are amazing. Let's jump to something else from the 80s. In '84, there was a TV series called Robotech. Giant robots with epic weapons galore. The very same year, FASA Corporation created a game called Battletech by making a game of armored combat using the robots from Robotech. Even if maybe the designs didn't really live up to the same level as the Robotech miniatures did, they came with something completely new to the hobby. However, underneath the surface there was a long, boring legal battle going on, and FASA lost the rights to use the imagery of the robots, meaning that none of the boxes could contain them or the miniatures could look like them. But for some reason they could keep the names of the robots. I don't know what went on, but these first robots and lost design have become known as the Unseen Mechs, and to this day remain legendary miniatures. Some of them you can find on eBay, but they're still super rare. So now let's go to that story that I told you about in the beginning, with the miniatures that have been lost for over 15 years. One of my viewers, Tim, no, not that Tim, got hold of a big lot of forgeworld miniatures in various stages of despair. Not knowing exactly what was in the box, Tim still bought the entire lot. Well at home, starting to pick out everything and cleaning it up, Tim found that he had found a gold mine. Tim had found a collection of some of the rarest forgeworld miniatures ever made. These are large-scale figures, display miniatures, statues, and busts. All these miniatures were only sold during a limited time. They had been left in a warehouse when Forgeworld had moved, and they had been sitting there for over 15 years when Tim had bought them, which means that no one even knew that they still existed. Tim reached out to some of the painters over at Games Workshop and could verify that some of these miniatures were in fact some of their paint jobs, which means that not only was it a rare collection of rare miniatures, but it was actually the box arts that Games Workshop had painted, and some of them were display pieces for different shows, which makes the collection even more rare. And I don't think I've seen a rarer find of miniatures. So Tim, I can only say congratulations for this find. And with that, I want to say thanks to all of my patrons who sponsor us making these videos every week. I could not thank you guys enough. And of course, a special thanks to our sponsor, Squarespace. With that, thanks for watching. Bye bye.